You're listening to the Cantina Cast, your home for thought-provoking Star Wars talk. Join Albert and Jonesy in breaking down the latest news, trailers, movies, and of course, your favorite characters from a galaxy far, far away.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Cantina Cast. My name is Albert Padilla, and this is episode 390, The Bounty of Han Solo. We are kind of throwing a curveball at you guys because we'd mentioned we were going to be doing something totally different, but with the conclusion of this first, I guess, arc and trilogy of War of the Bounty Hunters, it felt like we really needed to talk about it because there's quite a bit that happens here, quite a bit, really some good spoilers, and what it potentially could be setting up, I think, is pretty exciting stuff. So, and speaking of exciting stuff, is Mr. Jonesy himself. Jonesy, welcome back to the show, sir. How are you doing tonight?
I'm doing well, man. This is a exciting curveball, like you said, to throw at people, but something I've been reading for a while. So excited to talk about it finally on the main show.
Yeah. No, you've been doing the Patreon stuff, and that certainly is going to get into, before there's any kind of confusion as to what we're doing here. That's going to get into a lot more detail probably than we're going to be doing on this show. We're going to hit some of the high level bullets, but the plan is to really kind of go through all 5 of the issues at high level and kind of pull out the stuff that you probably need to know, elaborate on that, speculate on where this whole thing could be going. Because like I said, was this recently that they announced? I don't want to just jump into this, but was it recently they announced that this was a 3-part trilogy? Because I know it says it at the very end, and that was my first awareness. But then I started thinking, well, maybe I did read about that somewhere else.
Yeah, Crimson Reign has been advertised as what's coming after this anyway. Chapter 2, they're calling it. So it's like a 3-chapter arc here that we've got. I don't know if this was announced right at the very beginning, but I want to say it was. I think Charles Soule announced that it was going to be a 3-chapter arc overall. And I don't know if they're all 5 issues, but that seems to be a pretty safe assumption. So I think this was the plan from early on, because you don't just start these things arbitrarily or on the fly, especially with the way that the writers and the artists need all the time to prepare for it. But yeah, so I think it was probably the plan all along, and we'll have to see what it is and what the true driver of the series really is. It wasn't just a arbitrary story of Han Solo getting stolen from Boba Fett. It's setting up a much bigger picture, which it was clear right off the bat in issue 1 towards the very end, but was something that we weren't entirely aware was going to happen.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely some world building. And I mean, I'm excited because, this is an area of Star Wars that it feels like we've talked about forever, right? And it feels like, we've been talking about this, the subject or the idea that, is this era just dead? Is there any story left? How many people really want to know what's going on during this? And I think the proof is already out there. As many times as we've probably said, that, or at least, I don't know, we've been pretty open and said, look, just give us a good story, right?
Right.
Give us a good story, give us good characters, even if it is in the same era, we're fine with it all. And this one does feel fresh. Like, we'll get into that in a second. Do we have any news? Because I didn't even look to see if there's any news.
That's a good.
All right, we're not doing news.
That's a good question. Yeah, someone else.
No news this week.
Someone else do the research for us in the chat, and we'll.
No news this week.
Right.
We'll come back to the news next week. But let's talk about this. So I want to talk about. We'll do our kind of traditional initial thoughts and what we thought about the series and all of that. But the one thing that I felt was really unique about this 5-issue limited series thing that's part of a trilogy is that Soule, so Charles Soule is the writer. We should probably mention that already. But he found a way, I think, to kind of tie a lot of the stuff that we see in canon from movies, TV, and the comics. Right. And he found a way to kind of thread this needle of Han Solo being kind of that centerpiece, at least for this 5-arc series. Right. And it pulls in all kinds of people. We've got the Hutts. We've got every one of the bounty hunters from Empire Strikes Back, with the exception. No, I think they're all in there, actually, with the exception of IG-88. And, we've got Valance is another character, the cyborg that, has got a history with Han Solo in there. We've got Vader, we've got Luke, Leia, Lando, Chewie. It's just like this who's who of Star Wars. Like Star Wars, this is your Empire Strikes Back, this is your life kind of thing. All these characters just kind of came forward. Did I mention the Hutts too?
They're
a huge
part.
They
were a pretty small part of this, right?
Yeah, no, they played a pretty
Oh, they were
yeah,
huge. Yeah,
they were a huge part,
yeah, it
right?
was kind of cool seeing the Hut Cartel get some time here in the limelight, however brief it may be.
Yeah, I mean, we had Huts with Pecs,
That is
which
true,
was
man. Yeah, Baku is, man, he's been working out.
he's lifting. He's like taking
Yeah.
a page right out of
Joe's book. Yeah.
Joe's book. Yeah,
Uh-huh.
exactly.
Yeah, Joe's our friend here on the network, of course.
But
Yeah.
yeah, no, I just love the fact that it was, it was really grand in terms of scope, but it didn't feel sprawling. It was still centered throughout the entire time. So I really enjoyed the arc. I mean, it wasn't like amazing. I wish it would have been a little bit longer, and it did feel like at times, there's certain things that they still can't do. He can't go kill off characters or have these
Right.
really big significant moments, and that's always been the case, whether it be Legends or anything else. Anytime they pick up these characters, they are kind of limited. It's not like the High Republic in that regard, but it was still a pretty captivating story, I thought.
Right.
But what are your thoughts?
As we get started here, let me ask you a question. So this was a crossover event. And for those not familiar with comics, crossover events means that it's not self-contained to one series of comics. It goes up to all of the other in that area. So this was in Star Wars, the flagship comic, Dr. Aphra, Vader. There were a bunch of one-shots that happened. So I mean, there were all over the place. I think it was like something like 20 something issues, I think overall, maybe
Mhm.
25 issues, something like that, where to get the total complete story, and then there was an alpha cut, which I got the director's cut of the alpha book, basically the prologue. So did you read all of that, or did you just stick to the core story of War of the Bounty Hunters actual comic series?
No, I knew you were going to be on this show, so I did not.
Well, I didn't do it either, man. I just can't do that. It's just too much for me to then try to reconcile all of it. For the people who have to know all the things, yeah, it's important for them to do that.
Well, and I'm going to so make no mistake about it. I mean, we kind of made this decision last minute to kind of pull this together and at least cover the core 5 issues of the story.
Right.
But that didn't give me enough time to go back and read some of the other ones yet. So I will go through and read all those, and that's not uncommon for me. Like I think you and I maybe off the air have had conversations about comics and those story arcs. And do you go after like I don't know. This is a really bad example because it's so long ago, but I'm going to date myself. But something like the Civil War series, we were
Yeah.
just talking about that earlier today. Where they had the core 5, 6 issues or whatever, and then they, like you said, they have all these other comics that it's they're kind of wanting you to go buy those additional issues and maybe tip your toe in some of the other stories and see if you're interested in that kind of thing.
Right.
It's all done from a marketing and money making perspective, but typically with those, I do go buy all of the one shots and all of the ancillary because I got to have that whole kind of complete story, even if the side quests, maybe or may or may not be significant in any way. So
I think the thing that they missed this time. So generally, I'm with you. I'll go back and pick up maybe all of them, but usually, an issue here or there where something may have interesting could have happened, or a character that I really love. So Civil War is a great example. I
mhm.
bought all of the Spider-Man comics that went with it because Spider-Man's my favorite Marvel character and kind of my favorite superhero all around.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it made a lot of sense for me to do that. But at the same time, I went and bought other ones too that I was kind of interested or whatnot to do that. Where I think the Or the Bounty Hunter series missed an opportunity. I think only one time did they actually have a little reference, and you and I have talked about this in the past when we've talked about comics.
Oh,
Back in the day, they used to say, see Star Wars issue 15 for the backstory, basically, or some. Only one time did they make that reference, and it was in an Afra. It was for Afra.
Afra, yeah,
Right,
like
so
the breadcrumb thing.
yeah,
Right?
yeah, right. So how did Boba find or know why Afra was there or something like that, right? And that was the only time I remember seeing just a little call out box that said, "Go look at this other comic." Otherwise, you just had to have all just kind of follow it all. And the more casual fan wasn't going to go and do that. So I think that was a bit of a missed opportunity because people won't know what they missed. And
Mhm.
especially like the Darth Vader series, some of those might not need as much advertising, but let's be honest, some of these others don't always get enough, just kind of get enough limelight on it, especially when they did all the one shots of all the different characters that showed up in the series. But
Yeah.
overall, I thought this was pretty cool. And I said this in the Patreon episode. I think the first one was this was dangerous because the problem we've always had, or the people that we get concerned, is that you all of a sudden now you're filling in all the gaps, right? You're telling stories where well, okay, well, Boba just took, Han from Cloud City to Tatooine, no problems. That works pretty well, right? I mean, that's okay.
Yeah.
So the question is always, well, do they need to have this big elaborate story in the meantime that had all of the major players in it? Because it just seems like, well, why didn't they put that into a movie? And that's the argument that gets made quite a bit. It's not what I'm projecting here, but that's the argument that gets made quite a bit. And this really did dangerously do that. And it kind of got a little drifty in the middle, but I think it finished in a strong enough way. And like you and I were talking about before it came on air, the story is not really about Han Solo and recovering Han Solo. It appears like this is a Crimson Dawn series, and this is simply introducing them into the back into the world, into the galaxy.
Mm-hmm.
And it just happened that they were really just the player playing putting the chessboard together and seeing kind of what happened in this first foray into it. And there were some nice lessons learned. I think we got a nice little recap there from Kira at the very end. But so
Yeah.
so I think it's very much a setup chapter, but it did have some really great moments. And you and I talked about it. We agree on this. There was some fantastic art throughout these series, whether you like covers or you like the art inside the book itself.
Yeah. I mean, from a quality perspective, yeah, writing, the art, the covers, all of that was good stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I will say this. So the writing, while I think the overall story and the writing were good, the problem with comics, I don't really put this on Charles Soule specifically, but the problem with comics is that they just have to come up with so much dialogue to get through 32 pages, is that it's just unnecessary. There's so much unnecessary crap that goes in in between it. And Boba Fett's not a guy that talks a lot, but he talked a lot in this series
He does
because
talk a lot. Yeah.
right, because I mean
He has to.
he kind of
right.
has to, right? But it's just it's excessive, right? You're like, okay, this is not the character I know. And it kind of that's the sense you kind of get. And you have to look past that, I think, to not lose your place in it. And if you're not typically into comics, you're not really prepared for that. And I could see where that could be a bit jarring to just pick up the book and say, like, man, this guy babbles all the time. And he has pun after pun after pun. He's hanging out with Padilla over there.
Yeah.
Which I'm pretty sure in one issue, I think he dropped like 2 or 3 puns in a row.
Yeah, I fully approve all of the puns.
Right.
Yeah, that's it. It's interesting you bring that up because it, believe it or not, Jonesy hadn't looked at the show notes. That's not uncommon, but
No,
I'm kidding. I'm kidding. That's a joke. That was
only
joke,
halfway true.
halfway true. But there is a question I have in here later that we'll get to about specifically about Boba Fett and whether this was the same character that we've seen in the TV series or in the comics or in the movies, I should say, right? Because I'm with you 100%. There were certain things that felt different, and it's probably more nuanced because it is a comic book as to why it's different. But more on that here a little bit later.
Yeah.
I think there was something else I was just going to bring up about this series, and it's escaped me. So I'll come back to it here in a little bit. But before we go any further, I thought we could do is just kind of go through the really big bullets of what happened without a lot of context, and hopefully we'll be able to fill in the context as we continue to talk about this and all of that. So I'm going to run through some of this, and at any point, if you want to just stop me, go right ahead. If you want to color comment on it, that's totally cool. But I can probably get through the entire 5 books here in like 60 seconds or less. It's probably more like
no
30,
one that listens to the show on a regular basis believes you, by the way.
Okay. All right. Here we go. The next 10 minutes will be dedicated to summarizing. Okay. So this is what you need to know. And what you need to know is, first off, Solo's in Carbonite, right? Yeah, just kidding. He goes missing. So when we leave The Empire Strikes Back, Boba's got Han Solo. Everything looks good. He loads him up into Slave 1, takes off. And we assume at that point, he just goes straight over to Jabba and just drops him off, collects his big money, and, hangs out there at the palace.
Yeah, hangs for the party. Right.
Right. That's not exactly what happens. In fact, not at all what happens, which is kind of cool. Because it does seem kind of simplistic, right? There's a lot more to it. What we find out is not only is Han Solo taken from Boba Fett, there's now a massive bounty out on Boba Fett. And what this does is it now brings in all of this cast of characters of bounty hunters that we've seen in, like you said, in Empire Strikes Back, and we talked about Valance from the comics. They are all now after Boba Fett as well. And so that creates a lot of tension because he's now having to fend off in addition to losing Han Solo, he's trying to fend off all these other bounty hunters.
Right.
But on top of that,
but hold on now.
Go ahead. Yeah.
Our dear listeners are asking, but how did Boba Fett lose Han Solo? And this is where you have to be part of the Alpha series to go get that information.
That is the very first question I have when we get to Boba Fett is what happened? How did we get here? So we'll come back to that here in a little bit.
All right.
On top of that, you've got Leia, Lando, you've got Chewie involved. They're all looking, obviously, try to reclaim Han Solo because that was kind of what they were set to do right after Empire Strikes Back. So they picked that up. He discovers that Solo was taken by Crimson Dawn. Yes, that Crimson Dawn, who is now led by Kira.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, that Kira from Solo Star Wars story. So she's still around. And Kira throws this like auction party. She invites all these crime lords and bounty hunters.
All the major players, yeah.
All the bad guys, and says, look, we own him now, or we have him. We're going to throw him up from auction, and we want everybody. And so this attracts, of course, the Hutts and all the bounty hunters, the Empire's there. I love that part too. While they were doing that, there was like, the Empire's looking around going, we're here with a bunch of nobodies. Like,
right.
This is well below us that we should even be among these people. And you had other groups like that, like the Pikes were there.
Yeah.
Black Sun was there. Yeah. And so they were all kind of having that same feeling like, whoa, this is
we thought like this was a private engagement.
Yeah. It's like that scene where, was it the Batman movie where Joker pulls in all the bad guys and they're all kind of looking at each other trying to wonder, what's going on. And it's essentially the same thing. She's just pulled everybody together for this party, this gala that she's throwing, which was interesting. And so this is really, he's going to go to the highest bidder. So someone's dad shows up to this party, which is Darth Vader Darth Vader even shows up at one point, right? He's coming in claiming, hey, Solo's mine. It's property of the Empire, like as if everything is now the Empire, right?
Actually, he said that almost exactly.
Yeah. He's like, we own everything, so this is now
we
ours.
Own you, actually.
Yeah, this party's over is essentially what he says.
Right.
In not so many words. There's a moment there where Kira is finally like, okay, fine, you can have him. However, I want to get paid for this, right? At least get my money from this. And so they get into a battle. So you actually have a moment in here where Vader is fighting Kira. And as
that was intense.
It was. And you think about it, she actually does pretty good. I mean, I would say that Vader probably was maybe pulling punches, but it didn't look like it. And we got to remember that. And he makes a comment about her master, Terras Kasi being the form. He recognizes the form. What he doesn't know, I'm pretty sure he doesn't, maybe he does, is that, she was obviously trained by Darth Maul. So,
but she knew Terras Kasi before
she did,
that, though, right?
Before that, yeah.
Yeah.
I guess that's true. I had read that as yes, but Maul may have done something more here. I thought it was kind of a nod to Darth Maul, but either way,
it was definitely a tweaking of what reality was of what we already know. But it was cool. Yeah. I like the dialogue that we get from Vader, though, that it's a lost art and that it's a shame that he's going to have to kill her because he would love to, basically
harness it.
Yeah, basically. I mean, and he, voices how much she has skill, and it's a shame that he has to kill her. I mean, he's like, man, this is going to hurt me more than it hurts you, but we're going to do it anyway. But but he has the Force, and so at the end of the day, he cheats.
Yes, yeah, as he always does.
Right,
cheaters. So, and then to make things even more complicated, we have the introduction of Luke Skywalker, and because things could get messy if suddenly Luke Skywalker is there with Darth Vader, which would kind of really, undermine everything that happens in Return of the Jedi.
Right.
Luke decides he's just going to make his presence known in his X-Wing and take off and and just try to lure Vader out of there. Like, let's get him out of it. And sure enough, Vader does that, right? He's after Luke, and they've had the whole father and son thing. And so he leaves the party and decides he's just going to chase Luke. And they end up, it's kind of comical because they end up just really literally he chases them like the rest of the storyline. Next 2 issues, he's just kind of, they're out in space and flying around and doing whatever they're doing.
Yeah.
But it was a way to get him out of there because, you can't have Vader in the party because that just disrupts everything, the whole storyline. Right. Can't have Luke there either. So you got to figure out a way to get rid of them. So they're gone. They load up. I'm still under 60 seconds, right? At this point?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Just on the cusp. Yeah.
Just on the cusp. All right. Fett fires a seismic charge, which is I won't even give you the context. It's just there. That was wonderful that he did that. The Hutts then decide they're going to send an entire armada. So they bring in a whole armada of ships that show up to reclaim Solo. Fett ends up boarding the Executor, which is Vader's Super Star Destroyer, for those of you who may not remember that.
Right.
He and Valance, believe it or not. So Valance, the bounty hunter, get together. They're kind of, they're at odds with each other. In fact, Fett wants Solo because he wants to turn the bounty in, and Valance is trying to protect Han Solo because they've got history back from, back in the, when he was a cadet in the Empire.
Something like that.
And then later on, I mean, there's a whole bunch of story there with Valance, but later on, he, I can't remember, Solo does something for him, and he starts working for the Rebel Alliance at some point.
Right.
And so he's kind of like this bounty hunter, but he's working side gigs for the Rebel Alliance.
Right.
So he
was working with Dash Rendar. Yeah. And this one.
No, Dengar.
Oh, yeah. Sorry.
Yeah.
I've got Shadows of the Empire.
Hey, spoilers. We don't want to talk about Dash Rendar because
my bad. Yeah.
Yeah, that's spoiler territory. No, Dengar. Of all people, that bozo. He's like the crim. Like, I hate him now. I love
him in Robot Chicken. Yeah, see, he's like the used car salesman.
Yeah,
which is about right. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. He's not far off from being that used car. He's so sleazy, and I don't know. I love the fact that Soul made me hate him even more than I did already because his whole costume is stupid. But all right, so Fett ends up killing Valance, which we kind of saw coming. That really wasn't going to work.
I don't think he's actually dead.
He's blown into bit. He's a cyborg. So if anybody doesn't know who Valance is, he's kind of cyborg. He's a cyborg. He looks like the Terminator, or I guess would be one way to describe him.
Yeah, half his face is human, half is Terminator-ish, right?
Yeah, even his whole body, like his torso, is like all
there's
cyborg.
there's not much flesh and bone left.
More machine than man, would you say?
Yeah, maybe. I've never heard that before. You want to trademark it?
We can try and go after it. But so yeah, he blows him up, and he's laying there, and he'll be back. And again, that's the whole thing. Like, there weren't a whole lot of people that did die. Yeah. And then so Vader then decides that, the Emperor finally comes in. It's like, okay, stop the shenanigans, go get what's ours, and be done with all this, Vader. And so Vader's like pulls away from Luke, decides he's gonna have to chase that another day, and comes back.
Palpatine wasn't given the whole story though either, so.
Yeah. You want to give them context on that?
Yeah. Well, there's so many pieces kind of in between all of this, but yeah. So Vader's out there chasing. He doesn't want to be interrupted because Admiral Piet is the commanding officer on the Star Destroyer, of course. You know, he's just interrupting him with whatever's going on with the Hutt flotilla or armada, and Vader's like, I don't care. Like, I'm chasing my prize here.
Yeah. Right.
But so instead of going to Vader when some other things start happening, then Piet decides to work around him and goes to Palpatine and tells Palpatine that, they've got Han Solo and the Hutts are doing all this stuff. And Palpatine inserts himself in off screen, of course, just through Piet, and tells Piet that I want Vader to go handle the Hutts. Like, it's an important alliance for us long term. And that was something we got throughout these episodes is Jabba and Palpatine take the long view. So when we talk about the Hutts, we're talking about the Hutt Council. We're not talking about Jabba the Hutt, and we'll clarify that here in a few minutes.
Yeah.
Right, yeah, because there's a lot of things in between here. But yeah, so gosh, I lost where I was at. So Vader has to go take care of the Hutts personally, which means that no one's going to survive. But the whole context around all that, like why they were in that position in the first place, and why they decided to like do such a huge offensive. There's a couple wrinkles in there we'll have to come around to here in a few minutes.
Yep. Yeah, it was kind of like Piet going, he's not listening to me, Dad. Can you please tell him to come back and save us and protect us?
Yeah, which is weird. I never really got that impression that Piet was really that kind of officer, but
no, I feel like he felt like he was a company man, right?
Yeah,
for Vader, and
yeah, he really didn't. I mean, Ramadi was in this, and that was another one that makes more sense. That he was a bit arrogant and thought everyone was beneath him, but I wouldn't really have expected that from Piet,
Yeah, and Ramadi he was the one in Solo,
right?
So probably it almost feels like there's two sides. Now I'm really digressing, but it feels like there's two sides of the Empire, right? There you've got those loyal to Krennic and those loyal to Tarkin. He felt like he was probably on. Well, I don't know where side he was probably on. Maybe Krennic.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, and then you got Sly Moore thrown into all of this too. And Sly Moore's an interesting one because she's force sensitive.
Oh boy. Okay.
Yeah, I mean,
Let's get back on.
Yeah, this is why I started doing them issue by issue.
Yeah, well, this the thing. That's why I said I loved about this is they pulled in all these characters and found a way to kind of like naturally. He found a way to kind of put them in the story naturally, weave them in without it feeling like, oh, look at this person. Oh, look at this person.
But if people are feeling like it was a bit crowded, it was a bit crowded.
There's a few.
Yeah, there was a lot of moving parts and a lot of things are like, okay, how are they? And this is where we go back to, did you read all the things? Do you like all the things? Because it's a bit difficult to keep up with of why anybody's where they're at and whether it matters if they're there or not.
All right, so Vader ends up killing all the Hutts, with the exception of Jabba.
Yeah,
and this is
Jabba's not there. Yeah,
right, because Jabba left. Like he already saw the writing in the wall. I don't want to be a part of this. Yes, I need Solo, however, not at the risk of upsetting the Empire, right?
Right.
And so he gets out of Dodge, and Vader does what he needs to do and kills all of them. It kind of wraps up with Kira telling her group of Crimson Dawn, which includes Ren, and a ton of other people, hosts of characters. If you got that up, we'll pull it up a little bit later.
Oh yeah, the last page.
Yeah, and she tells them like, "Hey, y'all did a great job." So Ren's a part of Crimson Dawn. Surprise, spoiler. And she's pretty happy with the chaos she's created. Like this was all intentional, right? Her goal was to bring all of these groups together and just stir some stuff up, right? Unsettle things, weaken some groups. And I don't know if she got. I think it turned out better than what she probably could have wanted, given that the Hutts have been pretty much decimated. I mean, you still got Jabba to contend with, but yeah, blow that up, enhance.
Well, I would if it would. Is that better? No, it's not better.
The black is bigger,
right? So anyway,
all right. Well, you can see him. Go ahead.
Yeah, he's right there in the middle though, without the shirt. That's right.
Well, and there's another one too, isn't there?
Yeah, no, the other knights are there. Is that Apku? And there's a little kid Knights of Ren dude down there now.
Yeah, he's a kid. I don't know. Is he a kid or is he a little person? We'll find out.
Oops.
The whole comic finally. So this is kind of like this sets up the very end for her, and then it ends with Boba turning Han Solo over to Jabba the Hutt, and that concludes the 60-second overview of the first 5 issues of War of the Bounty Hunters.
Right, and people are probably like, "Wow, I am totally confused why anything happened in this in this whole comic series. I don't have any idea what actually really happened." So yeah. So maybe let's start digging into some pieces here. So again, the reason why this arc is important is because it reintroduces Crimson Dawn back into the galaxy. Everyone knows who Crimson Dawn is, but they don't know. They thought they were dismantled, right? They thought that they were absorbed by all of the other syndicates and that there was really nothing left. Now, some people like Jabba remember that Crimson Dawn was led by Darth Maul. Now, they don't name drop Maul specifically, but they do allude to him that he was a very powerful character. So anybody that has now taken over Crimson Dawn from him must either be very powerful and either killed him, and so he's like, this is interesting. Jabba's always playing the long game. I think it's always something to remember. He's always looking out for the future. And so, but that's why this this beginning arc is really important. It was for Crimson Dawn to be reintroduced. It was for them to show the galaxy and show all these syndicates, including the Empire, that they could do things of value, like so they could get a high value target, things that people all want. Han Solo is kind of one of those, and Kira actually summarizes Han pretty well perfectly, because she's like, this is a guy that you love him, you hate him, but somehow and she's telling this to her aides, that somehow Han is connected to practically every powerful organization in the galaxy.
Which is true.
Yeah, you name it. They either owe him something. He's dealt with them. They're friends, they're enemies, or they hate him, they love him, whatever it is. But so that part was important. But then also, you had mentioned that Kira and Vader battle. This was really critical, and Kira summarizes this for us towards the end, that they need to see Crimson Dawn's strength. And specifically around the Empire, I think that they won't back down from a fight. And who else better to show your strength against than the Emperor's enforcer, Darth
Mhm.
Vader.
Right.
So that's why this story is important, and that's why this is within the context of the story. Why Crimson Dawn is doing all of this. This is really their plan. All of the other things kind of happening are ancillary. So that's kind of the other. That's kind of the reason why the story exists.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and that's going to do it for the show. We hope you guys. No, I'm kidding.
All right. So you asked. All right. So how did we get here? Right. So how did
Yeah.
Boba Fett lose Han Solo? So in the Alpha comic, which is again like a prologue,
Right.
we find out that Han is really not stable. There's a malfunction in the carbonite. So he's starting to melt. You can see like his hands starting to actually melt. And well, not his hands, but like the carbonite. So he knows a guy who's the same race as Dex from Attack of the Clones that we get from that Obi-Wan eats with. And so
Cool.
he can save Han, and he's telling us if you don't do something quickly, Han's going to turn to goo. I mean, literally goo. That's the word they used. I'm not paraphrasing, which is pretty interesting. If you don't thaw someone out the right way with carbonite, they just, yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
that's a technical term, by the way. So, but of course, Boba is short on credits. Boba needs a score, is where we're at. We find that Boba is kind of on the outs of things. He's not on the outs, but he's not doing so hot in the cash department. And so this guy sends him out, this doctor, if you will, is going to, I'll do this, but you've got to go do this other thing for me. Which is a whole nother story that is like a arena fight and things like that, which is pretty much irrelevant at this point. There's a Django
Yeah.
name drop. He paints his armor black and so on and so forth. But while he's gone, people steal Han from this doctor after he's already repaired the carbonite chamber. So that's how Boba loses Han. When he comes back, he finds him dead, of course, and he has to piece together why why he lost his target and who had it. He has no idea who actually did it because there's no breadcrumbs yet.
Mm-hmm.
I'll pause there.
Well, thank you. Well, no, that's exactly. Yeah. So that brings us to pretty much the beginning of this and him going after,
Right.
trying to find out, piece together who took him, and again leads into this whole thing. So we just already gave you guys, for anybody join us, I gave you a quick, brief 60-second overview of what happened in the first 5 comics. And what I'd like to do from this point is just kind of talk about, I want to focus on Boba Fett. I want to focus on Kira, because both of those characters do feel like here, I'm going to ask you a question. It's not a loaded question, so just, take it for what it is. But who was this story about? Like this first 5 issues, who was the main character? Like, who should we be following or focusing on?
Well, I think that, well, again, why does the story exist, but who's the main focus of it?
Exactly. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
They're different. Right.
Yeah.
So,
right.
yeah, I think we agree that the reason for the story is for Crimson Dawn and Kira.
Right.
Boba Fett is the focus of the story. Everything is through his perspective, or
Exactly.
most of it's through his perspective. Most of, we get a few here and there, but most of this is us following Boba. So he's definitely the focal point of it. He's the one that is having all these things happen, and he's just kind of having these "oh come on" type of moments, throughout the story where things keep happening. He's like, this just can't be real.
Okay, next question that gets a little harder. No, I'm kidding. It's not.
Okay.
All right. So that's in terms of who the story's about and who we're kind of seeing this through their eyes.
Mm-hmm.
But so going back to that question I threw out there, because as I'm reading these, I'm thinking to myself, like, for the most part, most of the characters are well written. They're very in character, if you will, and except Boba Fett. Like, there was moments in there where he was making jokes. There was so we certainly got a lighter side of him, and that's probably intentional, given that we're getting him as kind of like this anti-hero going into Book of Boba Fett. Right? They're almost kind of hinting or signaling that this is something that's to come, even though he may not be exactly there now today, or at least in this moment. But for him, it did feel like at moments he was out of character, and I couldn't put my finger on, was that just a misstep in terms of the way he was written or interpreted, or was it really, like you said, which I'm probably leaning more towards, is with a comic book, sometimes you do have to give dialogue. You have to, well, not all the time, but sometimes you do have to kind of explain things. Otherwise, you can lose your audience, because you're only dealing with a certain amount of small panels, and there's only so much you can put on within a comic and all that. So without losing the context, you almost have to kind of put it in their face. And that does change the tone of the character a little bit, I thought, for Boba Fett.
Yeah, if you take a step back, and you look at the story as a whole, I think Boba Fett is very much in character, and I say that for a few reasons. So one is he's a ruthless killer, right? He does what he needs to do, and if you steal from him, you're going to die, and nothing will get in his way, and he will hunt you down. Those are things that we pretty much assume of Boba Fett, and they're right on the money, and they're
Yeah.
100% true.
Stayed true throughout all five. I would
Right.
agree.
Yeah, and so there are some other things too of he does he does stick to the code. This is kind of the reference back to the Mandalorian where, Din Djarin, made the mistake of asking more than he should know, right? He stepped outside of the code of the guild. Boba doesn't. When he's offered more money by the Rebel Alliance to, they will double whatever. He's like, no, a contract is a contract, a deal is a deal. I have a bounty. I will deliver this bounty, and that's it. So he doesn't get persuaded by that type of thing. So I think from those respects, very consistent.
Hmm.
Now, the parts that are more difficult in over the course of 5 issues are going to be like you were saying. It's the dialogue. It's the puns in there, right? So Boss gets his legs blown off, right? When there's a little head to head fight with the two of them, and it's a pretty cool fight. It's short lived, but it's pretty cool. But he ties Bosk around a rock. And Bosk is like, you can't leave me here because I'm cold blooded. And then Boba says, that's the thing. So am I.
So am I.
It's just like, come on,
It's like it's like Arnold Schwarzenegger in the Batman movies as Mr. Freeze and
It was actually
chill.
that's a great comparison. Yeah, Mr. Freeze, like everything was a pun, right? Wasn't
Yeah.
that the character was pretty awful too, but I mean, it was just yeah. But I think overall though, he was still what we expected. He's not the good guy, but he's also just trying to make his way through the galaxy and just do the job that he's able to do,
Yeah.
and that he wants to do. And he makes a deal with Valance, and they said, "Hey, but when we get to it, all bets are off. You take your shot, I'll take mine, and whatever we do." Now, he was a little sly with how he did it,
But
but
that's character.
he did warn him, that's that time, and he just didn't give him any time before he threw a detonator on him. But there were things that were sloppy though. Why do everybody in the Star Wars galaxy leave their damn ship doors open? I don't
Uh,
understand this. So,
it's a bounty hunter thing.
oh my God, it's so frustrating. Like right at the beginning.
Lock your doors, folks.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it's the thing. Slave one or fire spray, whatever we're calling it these days, they don't really specify any of that stuff. Forlom and Zuckuss ambush Boba Fett, right? And they leave a little thermal detonator on. He goes in there, it explodes. It doesn't do any super big damage to the ship, but it does damage it quite a bit, and it throws them. It gives them the advantage. But we find out that they've been on his ship, and of course, Boba's like,
They
"That's
went
just
through it all.
right, yeah." And he's like, "Well, that's disrespectful," and so on and so forth. But I'm like, "Well, stop leaving the door open." Like, whatever happened to? So the one thing about the expanded universe, if you remember some of these stories, they had all of this really intricate security systems on the Falcon and on Slave
Right.
One, to where if they tried to do something, it was booby trapped.
Mm,
That makes sense. I mean, now we're like in the new canon, like when it comes to security, we're kind of stupid. I
yeah.
mean, not that they were all that great in the original canon either, with, a droid can hack everything, but even still. So it was things like that, though. They're like, okay, he's not that sloppy. He can't be the best bounty hunter in the galaxy and be that sloppy.
And forget to set his car alarm. Yeah.
Exactly. And then again, the dialogue. But I mean, but again, if you step back and you look at the story as a whole, it was the Boba Fett that we all know and we would expect to see. And I think they did right from that. I really do like how they wrote the Hutts in this though, too. I thought that was really interesting too.
Yeah. So, and I think you've already answered this question, but the next question I had was whether or not you felt like Boba was good or bad. To summarize, I think what
Yeah.
you said is he was not a good guy.
He was Boba.
He was Boba Fett, right?
He's doing
Yeah,
a job.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So he stayed true in that regard. Yeah, another thing that was really interesting too is just his relationship. Like there was a really good moment. I'm glad that this moment came up specifically, but his relationship with the other bounty hunters, right?
Yeah.
In Legends, they seemed to do a lot of jobs, and this one felt like they're really well. Again, it's right after Empire, so there's not that much time has passed, but it was a very unique relationship with all the other bounty hunters, and that they were all kind of after. I mean, it didn't feel like there was any kind of honor among thieves to some extent, but they were definitely okay with doing whatever they needed to do. I mean, they wanted the money to bring Boba Fett in. Remember, he had millions of credits. I don't even know what the amount was that were on his head. And so they were all trying to cash in on that. But the one that stood out to me was the Bosk one, because they at one point, remember back in the Clone Wars, they were on a team. They were kind of they were running with each other. He was part of his crew, if you will. Bosk was. And
well, Bosk pulled him in, right? Yeah, it's the other
Yeah.
way. Into his clutch, as he likes to call it. I guess is what they call the Trandoshans. Yeah.
Yeah. And here we had a very different take where, you know, they did actually go at it. And again, he blew his legs off, which
they'll grow back.
You know, yeah, exactly. It's like he's just another skier at this point, just losing limbs left and right for the sake of you know.
That was a pretty cool panel, though. I will find that one while you summarize for us here.
Where we had no legs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome.
But yeah, so he runs into Forlom, Zuckuss, Bosk, Dengar. Valance was in there. The only ones again that weren't in there was IG-88, and we were trying to remember. I want to say there was an Age of Republic. There was a story that involved IG-88 that kind of explained his quote death, if you will.
Right.
But as we've mentioned on this show before, you know, the whole point, if they go back to the Legends stuff, anyways, those droids have several incarnations of their body, their droid bodies everywhere, right?
Backup
Their centrals
copies and all that.
Yeah, like they're all in the cloud, man. They're not. You're not taking it out. You may physically take out somebody like IG-88 or maybe IG-11. I don't know, but at the end of the day, they could just really upload themselves or download themselves directly into another body. And there's
the top frame, and you can kind of see him crawling in the second panel there.
It's very Anakin-ish, you know what I mean? Like crawling,
right?
No legs and having just battled. You know, he's clearly got the high ground there,
right? But again, though, I think it's the idea that it was nothing personal. I think the only one that even bordered on personal was Dengar, right? Because he's just such a clown, right? And everybody just hates him. Nobody wants to work with him. But everybody else, it was just a job. It was just business. And, you know, Boba's all too happy to dispense with some of that too, if you're going to get in the way. You know, Zuckuss gets his head blown off and then tossed over the bridge. But which was actually kind of amusing, actually.
Well, I was going to ask, I forgot to put that in notes, but I was going to ask you, so do you think he's dead?
He's a droid.
He's a droid.
Who knows? Yeah. And again, Forlom was, Zuckuss was kicked off the cliff. Forlom was tossed over the edge. My apologies for that one. So I don't know. Either one of them could be alive. You know, as a droid, Forlom, you know, might have survived the fall. Zuckuss was again kicked off a platform, but maybe another car caught him below or something. You know, crazy happened, but we don't know his fate. It doesn't really matter. No one really cares about Zuckuss. And I didn't read the one shot. There was a Forlom and Zuckuss, but I think it's how they learned about everything before that fight and when they show up. Yeah.
Well, and so with them, as tragic as that all is, those characters, like I said, there was really nobody that truly died in this comic outside of what's his name, Koku. What's his it wasn't Doku.
Baku.
What's Daku?
Baku in the rest
Baku,
of the council.
The Hutts.
Yeah.
With the exception of those Hutts, I don't know that anybody really you could truly say is dead. Valance, Forlom, Zuckuss,
right,
Bosk, they all were hurt and damaged, but they could still be around. So, but that really was important, right? They still, I think they still achieved what they needed to do with this series without having to go to dramatic effect of killing people off, that kind of thing.
Right.
Here's another question I got for you about. So early on, I think it's in the very first issue of this, the Boba Fett's vows that he is going to kill the leader of Crimson Dawn.
Someone's going to die.
Someone's going to die. It was almost like a prelude, like he's signaling that this is going to happen. And I thought it would be, what do you think the odds are that Kira makes her exit from the Star Wars universe thanks to at the hands of Boba Fett?
0.00000. Like,
really?
There's no
you
chance.
Don't think so?
No.
Okay. How does she go then?
I don't think she does. I think she survives, and I think they're just. I don't think she dies. I think she's too valuable of a character to keep around. To be honest with you, she's interesting enough, and she's got the skills, and I don't think she'll be killed off in this series or in any of the chapters.
All right, I'm gonna put a stake in the ground and say Boba Fett will kill Kira.
Well, but let's all right, let's skip to the very end then, Albert. So at the very end, Boba and Jabba reconcile, right? And so the reason why there was a Jabba put a bounty out on Boba in the first place was that Jabba doesn't like to be kept waiting. Boba lost it. There was confusion about whether he sold it. He thought he was betrayed, and the Hutts have to keep up a certain, type of
Image,
yeah. Your image has to be upheld, right?
reputation.
Right, yeah. If you're going to do something, wreck and source must happen. So anyway, but when they leave, uh, Jabba's like, "Hey, stick around the palace," So we're right where we left, right where we pick up at Return of the Jedi, is what it feels like. So for us to have him kill Kira or to really even have a confrontation with Kira, he would need to leave and then come back. I'm having
Mhm.
a hard time understanding why the hell Boba is sticking around anyway,
Yeah.
because it was really pretty loose, the reasons why, and there was really no reason for it. But I mean, he could see Han's pretty face hanging on the wall. But it's possible that he goes after Kira. I mean, it would make sense, but then why would he come back? I think that's the part that I would have a hard time with. But again, but then he doesn't make good on his promise, right? Someone's going to die, and that's the person because there's a little puck going around that's a invitation for all these people to come to this big soiree in the first place.
Hmm. So in my head canon, and it's a very loose theory at best, but the way I was seeing it is, okay, he goes and all the huts are gone, so he's looking at this as, okay, I only have to report to one hut. It's Jabba. He's now the kingpin, right? He's now the big crime lord, so I'll
Right.
just go work for him. Well, that goes to me. That feels like it's going to go at odds with what Kira's trying to do, right? She's trying to reestablish Crimson Dawn, make a statement, say they're the big priest. So now you've got two entities, really. You've got Jabba and his crime syndicate. You've got the Crimson Dawn, and she's trying to make a name for herself. I don't know that Jabba's going to like that. In fact, I think at this point we may see him going through, and maybe not in this series, but my gut tells me he's going to go around and start abolishing Black Sun, the Pikes, right? Really putting those guys, getting rid of those people so that he's not having to compete with them. And at some point, maybe it does come down to Crimson Dawn is left, or Crimson Dawn is becoming a nuisance and a problem. And so at some point, there's a, hey, go Boba, go deal with this in some way. And maybe that's where they finally meet up and he takes her out. For one, because he's been asked to do so by Jabba, who he now works for, who's employed by, has medical benefits through. And also because, she caused him all this grief of for nothing. I mean, eventually it all got to where it needed to go, but what a hot mess that he had to go through for all of this.
Yeah. So I guess I'll be the devil's advocate on this one and be the counterpoint to it. So I think a few things. So one, Jabba, I think, was reserved, and I think they paint this picture fairly well. Jabba was reserved as soon as the Empire showed up. Solo was the Empire's. He basically gifted what was his over to the Empire, right? And that he's just going to take that as write that off as a loss. And I think so. I don't know that there was anything extra there with Kira. Now with the other syndicates, the impression I'm given though is they all kind of operate in their own areas. There's not a lot of crossover because when they do crossover, there do seem to be conflicts, but they seem very careful in general to not invade each other's space too much. And I think we
Mhm.
even saw this with was it in Solo, right? With the Pikes, and we saw this. No. This was in Bad Batch. With Bad Batch, we don't want to cross the
Yes.
Pikes too much and things like that, right? So those are the things I think that they really do try to respect in some way. And we kind of see that when they're all in one place they all just kind of keep to themselves. They don't like each other, but at the same time, I don't think any of them want an outright war because at least they're protecting their business and they kind of grow it within the constraints they can, unless there's a big shift somewhere. And I think with the empire, they're all benefiting from the empire in some way. And so they don't necessarily going to do any kind of major shifts in that dynamic. Even with the huts kind of reduced in size, if you will. Although that we view it, I think you and I agree on this. We view it more as a consolidation. That's definitely how Jabba
Yeah.
the Hutt, views it.
Yeah. Right.
Right. So now he's the only power in effect, rather than having a council that basically he ignored anyway.
Yeah. I mean, he doesn't have to report to anybody. He's the last man standing.
Well, and
Yeah,
he was the leader of it, right? I mean, he was the leader of it without a doubt. There was a council, but their opinion didn't seem like it mattered a whole lot.
yeah, he went against them
Right.
all the time. He did so in this comic like two times at least. So
Yep.
All right. Well, let's. So that's a good segue, Nick, and so it's kind of our maybe final piece here. Is and about Kira herself. So we've talked
Yeah.
about Boba probably enough. So Kira being alive, like, just how did you feel about that? Like, uh, it's just something that never really crossed my mind, honestly. And partly because I mean, I liked her character. I really did like her character in Solo: A Star Wars Story, but
Yeah.
just Solo in general just feels like it's so like lost. You know what I mean? Like it's
Yeah, it
been
does.
just buried in the shuffle of all the stuff that's come out and the movies, and we tend to forget about it. Well, some do. I mean, don't get me wrong. There are people out there still vying for make Solo 2 happen
Yeah.
and all of
Calrissian
that.
Chronicles, make it so. Yeah.
Yep.
Let's do it.
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, but it was just to bring her back. I thought was pretty bold. Was not expected at all, at least by me. And I wonder what that does for the movies too. Like, do you feel like is this kind of a concession to, hey, we're never going to make Solo 2 happen, but here's the Kira story that
Yeah. It
where
really
it
did feel
goes.
like a love letter to Solo: A Star Wars Story for a few scenes, especially we got some dialogue from Lando that hints at what happened in Solo, right? Especially with Leia, where, Han and Kira were one say, and she's like, they were once what? Well, it
Mhm.
doesnt matter, type of
Yeah,
thing.
right. Right. Oh,
Right.
whatever.
And he's seen her fight, so he knows what she's capable of, and that so it was really cool to have, some sort of a backstory there that referenced the movie. I thought that was really nice because, again, Solo, I think, is overly criticized, and Kira, I think, was a good character, but so it was a bit of a love letter. Now with Kira in general, though, it was surprising to me to see her. I wasn't really expecting this at all because, again, we've kind of forgotten about Solo for the most part. It doesn't creep up into any conversations about meaningful stories that impact canon in some really broad way, and
Exactly.
there's
Yep.
not a lot of reference point back to it. So it was a surprise to see her back, and it was really a lot of question marks as to how is Crimson Dawn still around. We left Solo with that same thing. What's the dynamic between her and Maul? I Are we going to get some of that in Crimson Reign, which is chapter 2 of this trilogy? But I was really happy to see her, and it was really cool to see her fight Vader. I think the only thing I was a little mixed on was her kind of the way that she presented everything. Everything was very grandiose, right? Await the dawn, and we've
Hmm.
returned. I mean, it was just very, it's
What was
very,
she used?
yeah. It was what?
I would say she used await the rain is what she said at the very end.
Right. Yeah. So it was await the dawn, and now we're
Hmm.
awaiting the rain, right? And I think the last one is called
The Hidden
Hidden
Empire.
Empire. Yeah. Yeah. So it's a definitely foreshadowing, or kind of leaning us right into it. But it was just this very dramatic type of effect that just I can see that, like, the more I thought about it, it's like, okay, I can picture Kira doing this, but it still just seemed like she was still very cut and dry and very unemotional about things when she took care of business when she was working for what's his name? Dryden Voss.
Right.
Right.
Yep. Yep.
So it was a little bit
Okay.
different in that regard. But I was really glad to see her though. And I think the character was interesting enough that I want to see what happens next.
Well, and that's the next question here that I've got. And I don't, to be fair, I don't know that we have enough. I don't feel like we really have enough to kind of answer these questions. But there's obviously motive here for Kira, and I kind of see it in two ways. Like I can see it, I can potentially see it two different motives. Like, what does she want for Crimson Dawn, and what does she want for herself,
Right.
and which one leans naturally to help the other, and that sort of thing. Because she has a bone to pick with a number of people given what happened to her in Solo. And so maybe she is going after Solo. You would think if it was Solo, something personal, she would have defrosted him and did something horrible. So that kind of eliminates that because she had him in her possession there for a while.
Well, and this story kind of supports that she does care about Han, even if there's not a
Hmm.
future there.
Right.
At the very end, they clear some of that up as to how she really feels about him. Because at one point, she just says, when she's broadcasting everyone, or you can just shoot the bastard. It's cool. That's a
Yep.
quote.
Yep. Like, and that seems on character for her, or
Yeah.
maybe not. Maybe it's just her, posturing and trying to look
But
like
we do know she's ruthless, and we do know that she seems very, very. I'm really having a lot of hard times with words tonight, but she's very
motivated.
driven, right, and motivated. Yeah, and she wants power. She seems like she is power hungry, and she knows that she's capable of attaining it. And Crimson Dawn is that way, but of course, it really makes a huge question mark as to, well, what happened between her and Maul, right?
Hmm. Um, so I guess, do you have any theories at this point? As far as what she could possibly want for herself, what she wants Crimson Dawn. Because I mean, on the surface, it just looks like power. That's all she wants, is to be, make a power play, be up there with the big leagues, and bring Crimson Dawn back. But it just feels there's got to be like something more, especially when we're talking about Crimson Reign is the title for the next series, and then
Yeah.
the Hidden Empire, right? And not to, and this was revealed at the very end of the comic. The very last thing it says, it says there's two more series coming up.
Right.
The third one being the Hidden Empire, which, oh my god, my head starts spinning. Like, what does that mean? But what do you think? Do you have any good? And again, I know it's not a really fair question because they don't really give us a whole lot, and that's kind of the point. It's, we'll probably get all that in the second and third series. But any
Right.
thoughts?
And I think we have to go back and look at what we already know about Kira, and we look at Solo in particular, Solo: A Star Wars Story. She grew up as a street rat, not able to really make any kind of decisions on her own without being, controlled by someone or being sold into slavery or working for somebody else and feeling generally oppressed, right? And just constantly, she was an enforcer, but she didn't have the power. And clearly she had things that she wanted to drive forward. So I really do think it's just a lot of that baggage of where no one will ever control me, and I will, she is this extension of control to where she's out of control, I guess, a little bit with her. She's just very, very motivated to where she wants all the things. And I think it might be as core as that. Is just it's just rooted into her that she will never go back to the way that she was. And this is how she keeps doing it. And she just has to keep pushing that forward. And by using Crimson Dawn to accumulate that power and eliminate some of the others along the way, the Huts are now weakened a little bit. There was some discord between some of the clans and things. Those are things that benefit Crimson Dawn. And so she's trying to wiggle in there and show their wealth or show their influence, the things that they're capable of. But I think also that what she is capable of, and they will want to follow her, not necessarily have alliances, but actually follow her. What about you?
I think this is a big power play. I think she's going after Lady Proxima. I'm
Oof.
kidding. I'm kidding. But wouldn't we? I don't know. And like,
I
I'm
imagine we're
really,
going
that's
to
how.
get flashbacks at some point.
Well, that's, I
Yeah.
was going to ask you. Do you think we're going to see like a Lady Proxima reference, or she goes back and revisits or something? I mean, it would be interesting if there was something there of her trying to go get power back in some way there. But I don't know. It's really difficult. I'm with you 100%. She does, especially from Solo. It seemed like she was really trying to set herself up as, I'm much more than what I was, right? She
Right.
really wanted to leave that behind, that whole life of hers, which included Solo, behind, and be this prominent leader. And now Dryden Voss is gone, Darth Maul is gone, she's now in charge. Maybe it is just truly a power play for her to kind of establish herself as one of the big league players. But I don't know. There's something about it that makes me think there's a hidden agenda, or there's something deeper here. Like we're gonna get some kind of a deep cut reference to a character somewhere else, right? I can see Soul doing that, right? But I don't really have a good theory, honestly, because they don't really give us a whole lot. Again, this is like we mentioned, this is really focused on, we see everything through Boba Fett's eyes. He is obviously being impacted by what she's doing, but outside of what we get at the very end, where she says, "Okay, now we go on to phase 2," kind of thing,
Right.
yeah, without any kind of signaling there, then it's really hard to determine. But
Yeah. I mean, the question's out there of how did Crimson Dawn survive, but how did they go unnoticed for so long? Because
yeah, where they been?
right. And some of the other clans are like the Black Sun, I think, and maybe the Pikes made a comment that how do they accumulate this power? It looks like they haven't missed a beat. We thought everything was dismantled and was, not anywhere near this state, but it looks like they've just been. I mean, how do they stay hidden? And I don't know if the Hidden Empire's, you know, that story or not, but I'd like to understand and hear how they were able to do that without anyone noticing. You would think that there would be some sort of, you can't accumulate that wealth without doing something. So how did they
Mhm.
accumulate that kind of wealth, or is it all just for show? But their stuff looks like it's pretty high tech and the designs are really cool. And I mean, that all takes money.
Yep. Okay, well, we have the last part of this was really just kind of talk about predictions and speculation, and I think we've already kind of touched on most of this already. But are any wild guesses as to who we might see churn up? We've talked about IG-11, IG-88, maybe Afra and Santa, we've not really even mentioned them, but
Yeah, they were
they
there.
make an appearance here. So, is any chance that they'll pop up again for some reason? And then with like Ren and that whole crew, like I really feel like there's going to be a lot more focus there in kind of giving us the backstory and how they came to be and how did she get, tied to, is Snoke involved in this, right? I mean, once you get the Ren guys in there, now you start thinking, okay, is this Palpatine? Is it Palpatine that she's going after, or is it a Snoke that maybe she doesn't know about Palpatine, but maybe she knows about Snoke and she's really trying to, usurp him or implant him in some way. So what do you think?
Well, I mean, the wild theories and things are really more your bag. I look at things much more pragmatically, but because I think the second part of the story, the second chapter, is really going to be focusing more around what is Crimson Dawn doing with some of the other major players in the crime underworld, and seeing that. So I could see that we would get who was Durant's mom in Bad Batch, or no, maybe we'll see Roland Durant. I mean, because this is way
Oh,
after all that. So you could see a guy like Roland Durant get pulled from another series, right? And so I think we might see some deeper cuts in some of those ways. But again, we're going to see Valance again. It seems like there was some dialogue that she had as they, snapped a picture of other potential new allies, right? And some that they may have lost. But so I think we're going to see many of these people again. I don't think we need to. So will we see Boba Fett? I think that's possible. I think it's entirely possible with Jabba, but he's got to kind of leave back and forth with Jabba's palace, and that just kind of wears on me a little bit, of all the back and forth. And it's like the why. Why do you keep going back? There's no reason to go back, But so I think we'll see some of the same characters. I don't know if we'll get any real wild stuff. This era doesn't really give you a lot of surprises in that kind of way, though. We know pretty much all the players at this point, right?
yeah. Yeah. And
Is
we've got
there a
all
wild
those.
theory you've got about who might show up that we're not expecting besides Lady Proxima?
Lady Proxima was my ace in the hole.
Right, Maz.
Maz. Yeah. I mean, we're going to see Maz. We'll see Yoda.
I
No, I don't.
You know what? It wouldn't surprise me if we saw
Oh,
Maz.
knock it off.
I'm
No.
not even joking.
Get out of here.
What? She's popped up in other things.
I will leave this show if Maz Kanata shows up in the series. Making that statement right now. No, I'm kidding. I wouldn't leave the show.
All right.
But I'd be really upset and write a very stern letter to Charles Soule. But I don't know. I mean, it's, again, Snoke is my wild theory, and I hate that. I hate even uttering that word.
Yeah.
Because he comes up all the time. But, he showed up in the, he's tied to the Knights of Ren in some way. If what's lost on me is because when we go back to the Ben Solo comic, right?
Right.
They're kind of going after him, and we know Solo's talking to Ben Solo, but he doesn't really. It's like this ominous voice. So it seems like those guys are all kind of grouped up together. That boy band's together. They've got their band manager, whatever, Rhodey and Snoke. So there's probably something here. But if they're showing up here, like, are they? I don't know. That just throws me off. That whole Ren cameo really threw me off.
I'll give you that.
Was not expecting that. And that makes me think, okay, we've got this whole lineage here going on. And then when I see something like the Hidden Empire, are they hinting at are we going to get into, all the initial plans that are being laid out for Palpatine?
Right.
Where you've got the First Order maybe the First Order started way back even now, right? That's the quote Hidden Empire.
Well, and again, we've already had Exegol show up, in the Vader.
Oh, comics. Yeah, in the Vader comics, yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it feels like maybe they're kind of setting this up to be, we're going to get a lot of that background for what we saw in the sequel trilogy, and it really started much sooner than we had originally thought or anticipated.
I think it highlights, though, is that with Snoke in particular, at some point we're going to get that, right? Because there still seems to be some amount of demand that says, okay, how did Snoke really come about, and what was actually going on with that? And I think the comics are definitely a place to explore that, if not a novel.
Yeah. Beyond that, there's not a whole lot to go off of here. I mean, outside of just start throwing stuff out there like Lady Proxima and whatever. I mean,
Maz.
It's Maz. Yeah.
But maybe Chewie's Family and Life Day.
Oh, there you go. Why not? Throw them all in there.
Right.
So
when do we have a date on when Crimson Reign starts? It's December, I think.
2022 is what it says.
Oh, okay, beginning of next year.
Yeah. So
Okay.
we'll probably see that. Yeah, right. First part of next year, and then whenever Hidden Empire, soon after that, probably 2-3 months after that, I would imagine. Maybe not. Maybe sooner. Comics usually
because these
go
are
quicker.
Yeah, these are biweekly, or has this been monthly?
I think it's been monthly.
I'm terrible at tracking this stuff.
Well, I'm not any better. So you're asking.
Okay.
You're asking the blind leading the blind here. I have no idea.
Gotcha.
I just read them when they come out.
Just get all the variants.
Yep. You just spend all the money. I just read them. All right. I guess that's it. I mean, overall, I would say just to kind of put a bow on this thing. Again, it was a good series. I'd still recommend. I mean, I know we've spoiled just about everything. There's still some things that we didn't talk about that are probably worth reading. So if you've not had a chance to pick this up, the 5th issue just came out. Like, what was it? Wasn't it this week?
Yeah, it was just
like yesterday.
Well, it was last.
2 days.
No, it was
last Tuesday.
Yeah, last Wednesday. Yeah.
Last Wednesday. So you're not that far behind in getting caught up if you want to go back and kind of read these. And then certainly you've got all the other one-shot, storylines that are all kind of tied that kind of fill in the holes and the gaps here that we won't get into, at least on this show, not on the main show. But I think there's still a lot of story here. With comic books, sometimes there are things that they plant in some of those one-off issues that come up later on. So although it's not maybe imperative that you have that background for this story, it could play out a little bit later. So there may be, a way to entice you to kind of pick up some of that as well. And that'd be really great too. That would be give them a little bit more weight later on. But yeah, I did enjoy this series. And I'm looking forward to the next two, honestly. Like they've got my attention just from the scope of the storyline, the cast of characters, that common thread that they kind of needled here with Solo was really great. And, you've got Crimson Dawn back, you've got Kira back, you've got the Knights of Ren, and where the heck is this going? Right.
Yeah, there's a lot of different directions they can go with this. And I agree with you. I think this is something they found something that works pretty well, and it works for this medium really, really well. And they've got a good storyteller with Charles Soule. And I think it's worth sticking around and seeing what the next phase of this looks like. And I think it was done reasonably well. And I'm excited to see what happens next.
Yeah, it all feels like we're in the shadow of the Empire somehow.
Oh wow.
I don't know what. No, I'm kidding. All right.
Well, I mean, maybe.
Just kidding.
So a quick shout out though to Charles Soule, because he's listening, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But he's actually he's only a couple of issues of writing. I mean, this isn't released, but he's only a couple of issues as of today, October 19th, of reaching his 100th comic that he's written, which is pretty stellar.
100th for Star Wars?
100th issue of Star Wars, which is unprecedented. I don't
know that anybody's ever written that many.
He doesn't think so either. And he's claiming it even if it has. But he's pretty sure that no one has. I think he did a little bit of research, but it's unheard of, though, that someone sticks with a series for 100 issues, right? It happened way back in the day with Marvel, but these days, writers and artists, and they come and go. Or I mean, writers stick around for a bit for extended series, but for 100 issues across multiple series is pretty. It's an accomplishment. I think
it's a big deal. Yeah,
and it speaks to the relationship Charles Soule and of course some of the other writers that we've got in the bag these days, as to the relationship that they have and the quality of content that they're putting out, and that people are buying it, right? Because if people don't go buy it and people aren't enjoying it, then they won't. And I mean, Garen, with COVID and stuff, there's been a resurgence in comics, which I think has definitely helped a lot of these newer series that have come out in the last couple of years. But I think it's great that you have that opportunity to see quality content when maybe you didn't have that opportunity before. So, or you would have overlooked it before. So sometimes good things come out of crazy situations.
Well, I think that's going to do it for us here. Any final thoughts before we get out of here?
No, a huge thank you to everyone who showed up on the live stream. We streamed out to Twitter for the first time. Hopefully that went okay. We don't really have a way of seeing how it went, but we tried that instead of Twitch. Tell us if that's a problem, but we don't really see a whole lot of activity on Twitch because it's not really our bag. Mostly gaming and streaming and stuff there. But anyway, Risk, Twan, Staff, Chris, Leland, all the people who are kind of out there in the background, we appreciate everyone showing up, and hope you enjoyed the show, and certainly let us know your thoughts on things.
Okay, I'm going to roll the credits, and I I don't know if these are the right ones or not.
Well, it's always a mystery.
It's always going to be a mystery.
Watch it
All
be
right.
like High Republic. Nicely done, Howard.
Here we go. 3, 2, 1. We'll see you next week.
You're still listening? Wow, that's amazing. Well, I'm here to give you the disclaimer. Normally we do a big, long, drawn-out disclaimer thing saying what's what and who's what and all that other stuff, but I think you guys kind of know that Lucasfilm and Disney have no affiliation with us at all, and we have none with them. We talk about Star Wars, which is their property and all that other good, fun stuff, but I think you can tell which is our stuff and which is their stuff. If you can't, well, then send a lawyer to send an email to me, and I'll be glad to chat with them. Other than that, you know what's what, so that's your disclaimer.